My name is Richard Johnson, and if you had asked me a year ago what the proudest moment of my life would be, I would have said without hesitation, walking my daughter Emily down the aisle on her wedding day. That dream, however, turned into one of the most heartbreaking experiences of my entire existence. I'm 53 years old, a man who's spent the last 3 decades working as a contractor in Kent, England. I've built homes for other families, fixed broken roofs, restored gardens, and poured concrete foundations that will outlast me. My pride wasn't in the money I made, but in the stability I created for my only daughter. After her mother, Catherine, and I divorced, Emily became my anchor, the reason I got out of bed every morning when depression threatened to pull me under. Catherine remarried within 3 years of our separation. Her new husband, Andrew, was polite when I met him at first. He had that polished city of London charm, the kind of man who wore tailored suits and spoke as if he'd swallowed an etiquette manual. He wasn't cruel to me, but he always had this subtle way of reminding me that Catherine had moved on, and in her mind, so should I. Emily grew up shuttling between my small house in Canterbury and Catherine's larger place in Greenwich. I never begrudged her the nicer lifestyle when she was with her mother. If anything, I worked harder so that when Emily was with me, she never felt she was missing out. She loved both worlds: quiet weekends fishing with me in Dover, and glamorous shopping trips with her mom in London. For most of Emily's childhood, Andrew stayed in the background. He attended birthdays, graduations, the usual, but he never tried to play dad. At least, that's what I believed. As Emily got older, though, I noticed she started calling him Uncle Andrew less and Andrew more, until eventually she would mention him in ways that stung. Andrew helped me with my personal statement, or Andrew knows someone who can get me an internship. It wasn't betrayal, but it was a slow erosion of the pedestal I thought I stood on as her father. Still, when Emily called me one cold December evening last year and said, "Dad, I have the most amazing news, I'm engaged," my heart soared. I imagined the church, the white dress, the proud tears in my eyes. She told me she and her fiancé, Oliver, wanted to marry the following summer. A big wedding, she said. Something elegant, something memorable. Without hesitation, I told her, "Emily, I'll take care of it. Whatever you need." That night I pulled out my savings book. I had put money aside for her since the day she was born. Some fathers save for university. I saved for the moment I could give her the wedding of her dreams. The total was just over £25,000. It wasn't small change. Not for a man like me, but it was hers in my heart. The planning began quickly. Venues in London were expensive, but I wanted her to feel like royalty. We booked a Georgian-style manor house outside of Greenwich that had sprawling gardens and chandeliers that glittered like frozen starlight. Emily beamed when she saw it. "It's perfect, Dad," she whispered, hugging me tight. That moment alone was worth every pound I would spend. Over the next 6 months, I poured myself into the wedding. I worked overtime jobs, not because Emily demanded it, but because I wanted her to have the best designer flowers, a live jazz band, a photographer who'd capture her every smile. Catherine, to her credit, was civil during the process. She thanked me once, in her clipped tone, as though gratitude were a currency she rarely used. But Andrew, I began to notice his presence more and more. He sat in on planning meetings. He made suggestions about the wine list. He even offered to handle the seating arrangements, as if he were the groom's father. I brushed it off at first. Maybe he just wanted to help. Maybe he wanted to feel included. I told myself not to be petty. Then, about a month before the wedding, Emily invited me to coffee in a small cafe near Blackheath. I thought it was just to go over details or maybe to spend some father-daughter time before the big day. She stirred her cappuccino nervously, eyes darting everywhere, but at me. "Dad," she began, "there's something important we need to talk about." My stomach tightened. I thought maybe she was second-guessing the marriage, or maybe there had been a fight with Oliver. I reached across the table, touched her hand gently. "What is it, love?" She inhaled, then said the words that still echo in my head. "I've decided. I want Andrew to walk me down the aisle." For a moment, I thought I misheard. My brain scrambled to make sense of it. Surely she means Andrew will accompany Catherine, or Andrew will give a speech, or... "No," I said carefully, forcing a smile. "You mean with me, right? Both of us?" Her eyes filled with tears, but she didn't flinch. "No, Dad, just Andrew." The cafe noise around me faded. I swear I couldn't hear the clinking cups or the hiss of the espresso machine, just a hollow ringing in my ears. "Emily," my voice cracked. "I've dreamed of that moment since you were born. It's what fathers do. It's our tradition." She pulled her hand away. "Dad, please don't make this harder. Andrew has been there for me in ways you don't understand. He supported me during school, during uni applications. He's been a constant presence. It just feels right." It felt like she stabbed me, clean and deep, but then twisted the knife with her next words. And we've decided it would be best if you didn't come to the ceremony at all. I froze. What do you mean, didn't come? I'm your father. Her lips trembled. We just don't want any tension on the day. You can come to the reception later, but the ceremony Andrew will be the one standing beside me. At that moment, I didn't shout. I didn't curse. I didn't flip the table like some men might have. I just sat there, staring at the daughter I had raised, the daughter I had sacrificed for, the daughter I thought would always know who her true father was. Inside, though, something broke. I nodded slowly. I see. Thank you for telling me. Then I left. That night I couldn't sleep. I walked through the half-finished conservatory I was building at a client's house, staring at the beams I'd nailed together, thinking, how could she choose him over me? After everything. The next week, instead of finalizing payments, I made phone calls. Quiet, deliberate phone calls. To the caterer, to the florist, to the venue, to the band. Cancel the booking. I told them all. No payment will be made. Some argued. Some begged. One asked if I was sure. I was sure. If I wasn't good enough to stand beside my daughter on the biggest day of her life, then my money wasn't good enough to fund it. When I canceled the contracts, a strange calm settled over me. It wasn't satisfaction. Exactly. More like a cold, heavy certainty that I had done the only thing I could. I knew there would be consequences. I knew Emily would find out soon enough, but I didn't expect the speed with which the storm arrived. 2 days later, my phone rang at 6 in the morning. I had just finished making a pot of tea, the kind of ritual that usually grounds me. The screen flashed. Emily. My heart clenched. I answered. Her voice was sharp, frantic. Dad, what have you done? The venue says the booking is canceled. The florist says they can't deliver. The caterer said you pulled out. What's going on? I sat down slowly at the kitchen table, staring at the chipped wood grain. I told you, Emily. If I'm not good enough to be part of your ceremony. There was a pause, then an explosion of words. How could you do this to me? This isn't about you, Dad. It's my wedding. You promised me. You said you'd take care of it. I closed my eyes. And I would have, if I were allowed to be your father on that day. But you've chosen otherwise. Her breathing came in ragged gasps. For a moment, I thought she might break down crying. But instead she hissed. You're ruining everything. Do you know how selfish you sound? That word selfish cut deeper than anything else. After decades of sacrifices, extra shifts, missed holidays. Also, she could have opportunities. And she called me selfish. I'm sorry you feel that way, I said softly. But this is the line I have to draw. She hung up. By noon, Catherine called. Her voice, unlike Emily's, was icy and controlled. Richard, you've gone too far this time. This time? I asked bitterly. What other times are you referring to? I've bent over backwards for years, Catherine. I've put Emily first in everything. But apparently, that wasn't enough. You're punishing her, Catherine snapped. Do you understand that? This isn't about you and me. This isn't about your pride. Emily loves Andrew. He's been more of a father in recent years than you. Don't you dare. I interrupted, my voice rising for the first time. Don't you dare say he's more of a father than me. He didn't hold her when she had night terrors of 4 years old. He didn't teach her how to ride a bike on the gravel lane outside our old house. He didn't sit in hospital corridors when she had her appendix out, praying she'd be all right. That was me, not him. There was silence on the line. Then Catherine said coolly, believe what you want. But you've humiliated Emily. Everyone is talking. Oliver's family is furious. You've made her look like a fool. I laughed harshly. No, Catherine. I just refused to be made into one. She hung up without another word. The days that followed were a blur of whispers. Mutual friends called me, some angry, some sympathetic. A few said they admired my stance. Most, however, suggested I had acted out of spite. I kept my answers brief. Let them judge. They hadn't lived my life. Then came the final blow. A week before the original wedding date, Emily sent me a message. Dad, we've found another venue. Andrew is covering the cost. I still want you at the reception. But please don't cause a scene. If you can't support my choice, then maybe it's best you don't come at all. I stared at those words until they blurred. The man who had quietly stood in the background all those years was now not only walking my daughter down the aisle, but paying for the privilege one had been stripped of. I felt replaced, discarded. But beneath the despair, a flicker of resolve sparked. If I couldn't be there in person, I would at least know what happened. You see, part of my work as a contractor had introduced me to home security systems. Cameras, monitors, discrete setups. Months earlier, when Emily had chosen the manor house, I'd suggested installing a few cameras to capture the process of setup and decoration. She had laughed, called me overprepared, but allowed it. though the manor booking was cancelled. I had left similar equipment at my own property, tools of my trade. And when I learned the new venue, a riverside hotel in central London, was being decorated, I made a quiet phone call to an old colleague who handled audiovisual equipment. By the end of the week, I had a live feed. Nothing invasive, nothing in dressing rooms or private areas, just the ceremony hall and the reception space. The morning of the wedding, I sat in my modest living room, laptop open, tea growing cold beside me. On the screen, I saw the guests arrive. Women in pastel dresses, men in sharp suits, laughter, chatter, the glint of champagne glasses. Then Emily appeared. She was radiant. I won't deny it. Her gown shimmered, with beads that caught the sunlight, pouring through the tall windows. Her smile was wide, her eyes sparkling with nervous excitement. For a fleeting second, I wanted to be there to hug her, to whisper how beautiful she looked. He wore a perfectly tailored navy suit, his graying hair slicked back, his arm offered to Emily with theatrical grace. She took it, smiling up at him like he was some gallant hero. The sight twisted something inside me. The guest rose, the music swelled, and Andrew, not me, walked my daughter down the aisle. I gripped the edge of the table so tightly my knuckles turned white. The ceremony continued. Vows were exchanged, rings slipped on fingers, cheers erupted. I watched it all, stone-faced, the screen reflecting in my weary eyes. At the reception, speeches began. Catherine praised her wonderful husband Andrew for stepping up. Emily thanked the two men who shaped her life, Andrew for guiding her into adulthood, and Oliver for standing beside her now. My name was never mentioned, not once. It was as if I had been erased. I closed the laptop before the dancing began, sat there in silence, listening to the tick of the wall clock. For hours, I wrestled with my emotions, rage, sorrow, emptiness. But above it all, one question burned. Had I made a mistake? Should I have swallowed my pride? Let her have her way just to remain part of her world? But then another memory surfaced. That cafe. Emily's trembling lips as she told me I wasn't welcome. No, the line had already been crossed. If she wanted Andrew as her father figure, she could have him. But she would also learn what it meant to cast aside the man who had given her everything. The weeks after the wedding were quiet. Too quiet. Emily didn't call. Catherine didn't either. Andrew, I imagine, was reveling in his victory, though I had no proof. I went back to work, hammering nails, laying bricks, fixing roofs. But everything felt heavier. One evening, as I packed my tools, an older colleague named Martin clapped me on the shoulder. You look like a man carrying the world, Richard. What's wrong? I hesitated, then told him the story, from start to finish. He listened without interrupting, his weathered face unreadable. When I finished, he said simply, You stood up for yourself. That takes guts. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. I wanted to believe him, but deep down, I feared I had lost Emily forever. Still, part of me knew the story wasn't over. Choices have consequences, and Emily's choice choosing Andrew, erasing me, would ripple further than she expected. Because some truths can't stay buried, and some fathers don't fade away quietly. The weeks after Emily's wedding bled into months. At first, the silence between us was deafening. I went about my work in Kent as if nothing had happened, fixing gutters, sanding floors, building patios while inside. A storm raged. Every nail I hammered seemed to echo the same thought. She chose him, not me. I told myself to let her go. She was married now. She had made her choice. But when I drove past bridal shops or heard wedding bells from the village church, a knife twisted in my chest. Then one evening, 3 months after the ceremony, my phone buzzed. A message from Emily. Hi, Dad. Hope you're well. Could we talk sometime? My heart leapt and sank at the same time. Part of me wanted to ignore it, to let her feel the weight of what she had done. But another part, the part that still saw her as the little girl clutching my hand at the seaside, couldn't resist. I replied, Of course. When? We agreed to meet at a small cafe in Canterbury, neutral ground. The same kind of place where she had once broken my heart with her words. When she walked in, I was struck by how tired she looked. Her eyes had dark circles, and though she smiled, it was forced. Hi, Dad, she said softly, hugging me. I hesitated, then returned the embrace. We sat, ordered tea. For a while, she stirred hers in silence, just like that night months ago. Then she spoke. I know things have been strained, she began, and I want to say I'm sorry for how everything happened. Her voice cracked on the word sorry. I stared at her. You're sorry for the way it happened? Or sorry for the choice you made? She flinched. Both, I guess. It wasn't fair to shut you out completely, but I thought it would avoid conflict. Andrew said. She stopped abruptly. Andrew said what? I pressed. She bit her lip. He said you might try to cause trouble, that you'd make the day about yourself. He thought it would be better if he took on the role. I laughed bitterly. Convenient for him, wasn't it? She looked down. I see that now. But at the time, I believed him. He's always been so supportive, so confident. It felt natural to let him step in. I shook my head slowly. I may not be rich. I may not live in a fancy house. But I've given you everything I had. And yet, when it came down to it, you trusted him over me. Tears welled in her eyes. I know. And I regret it. But Dad, please understand. Andrew isn't who he seems. Those words froze me. What do you mean? She hesitated, then leaned closer. He's controlling. Since the wedding, he's been trying to make decisions for me and Oliver. Finances, where we live, even little things like what furniture we should buy. At first, I thought he was just being helpful. But now, it feels suffocating. He always has to have the final say. And when I push back, he gets this look in his eyes like I'm ungrateful. I clench my fist under the table. And you're only realizing this now, after letting him replace me at your own wedding. She winced. I didn't see it then. I wanted to believe he was the perfect father figure. But since the wedding, it's like he thinks I belong to him somehow. It's scary. For a long moment, I just stared at her. 1,000 emotions surged inside me: anger at Andrew, sadness for Emily, vindication that I had been right all along. Finally, I said quietly, "You need to be careful." She nodded, tears spilling down her cheeks. I know. I'm starting to understand that maybe I made the wrong choice, not just at the wedding, but in how I treated you. Hearing those words should have healed me. Instead, they deepened the ache, because apologies couldn't erase the memory of watching Andrew walk her down the aisle while I sat at home. But still, she was my daughter, and I couldn't abandon her now. Over the next few weeks, Emily and I met more often. She confided in me about the subtle manipulations Andrew pulled, how he offered to help with their rent but then used it as leverage in arguments, how he criticized Oliver's career choices, calling him weak and unambitious, how he tried to insert himself into every family decision. Oliver, she said, resented it deeply. Tension grew between them and Andrew. Catherine, of course, defended her husband blindly. One night, Emily called me in tears. Dad, Andrew said if I don't listen to him, I'll regret it. He didn't hit me, but the way he said it, I was scared. I felt fire ignite in my chest. Emily, listen to me. If he ever threatens you again, you call me immediately. I don't care what time it is. Do you understand? She sniffled. Yes, Dad. The man who had stolen my place was now poisoning my daughter's life. And Catherine blind. Foolish Catherine couldn't see it. I knew then that this wasn't over. Andrew might have won a battle, but the war for my daughter's well-being had just begun. One Sunday afternoon, while repairing a neighbor's fence, I heard a car pull into my driveway. Wiping sweat from my brow, I turned and froze. It was Andrew. He stepped out of a sleek black Mercedes, adjusting his cufflinks as if he were arriving for a business meeting, not a confrontation. Richard, he said smoothly, walking toward me. We need to talk. I set down my hammer, every muscle tensed. I have nothing to say to you. On the contrary, he replied, smirking. I think you have plenty. You've been meeting with Emily, filling her head with doubts, undermining my relationship with her. I barked a laugh. Your relationship with her? She's my daughter, Andrew. Not your property? His smile tightened. She's an adult now. Married. She doesn't need you interfering. You had your chance, Richard, and you squandered it. She chose me. Those last 3 words dripped with venom. I stepped closer, lowering my voice. No, she didn't choose you. You manipulated her. You poisoned her against me. But the truth is coming out, and you know it. For the first time, his polished mask slipped. His eyes narrowed, cold, and dangerous. Stay out of this, Johnson, or you'll regret it. He turned, got back in his car, and drove off, leaving a trail of dust on the country lane. I stood there, heart pounding, fists clenched. That was no longer just rivalry. That was a threat. And I knew then that Andrew's facade was cracking. The man everyone thought was a gentleman was nothing more than a predator in a tailored suit. That night, I wrote a letter to Emily. Not an email. Not a text, a handwritten letter. The kind fathers used to send their daughters when words mattered. In it, I told her everything I felt. My heartbreak, my anger, but most importantly, my unwavering love. I told her she would always be my daughter, no matter what choices she made. And I told her that when she was ready to break free of Andrew's shadow, I would be there waiting. I sealed the envelope and posted it the next morning. For the first time in months, I felt a strange peace. Because whatever happened next, Emily knew the truth. And Andrew, he had no idea. what storm was coming for him. I thought Andrew's threat outside my house would be the peak of his arrogance. I was wrong. It was only the beginning. A week after our confrontation, Emily called again. Her voice was shaky. Dad, can we meet? Oliver wants to talk to you too. I agreed immediately. We chose a quiet pub in Canterbury, one with low lighting and sturdy wooden tables that smelled faintly of ale. When I arrived, Emily was already there with Oliver. He looked tense, jaw clenched, his hand gripping hers tightly. Richard, he said, nodding stiffly. Until now, Oliver and I had only exchanged pleasantries. But that evening, his eyes carried the weight of a man at war. We ordered drinks. Nobody touched them. Finally, Oliver spoke. It's about Andrew. He's trying to control everything. Our finances, where we live, even how Emily should dress. He calls me useless because my job doesn't pay as much as his. He says Emily deserves better. I bit back a curse. And Catherine, Emily answered softly. She sides with him, always. She says he only wants what's best for us. But Dad, it's not about what's best. It's about control. Oliver leaned closer. He threatened me last week. Told me that if I can't provide for Emily the way he thinks I should, he'll step in. He said Emily doesn't need a weak husband. My blood boiled. He said that to your face? Oliver nodded. His hand trembled slightly, but his eyes burned with quiet fury. I won't let him ruin our marriage, but I can't fight him alone. Emily squeezed his hand. Her eyes searched mine, pleading. Dad, I don't know what to do. I feel trapped. I reached across the table, covering her hand with mine. You're not trapped, Emily. You have me. You always have. But this won't stop on its own. Andrew won't stop until he's forced to. They looked at me, uncertain. I could see the fear in Emily's eyes, the shame in Oliver's. They were young, still building their lives, and Andrew loomed over them like a shadow they couldn't escape. That night, I made a decision. I wouldn't just stand by anymore. I would gather proof of who Andrew really was. The opportunity came sooner than expected. A man named Philip who worked in finance in London. He had heard, through mutual contacts, that Andrew was under quiet investigation at his firm. Nothing official yet, but whispers of shady dealings, conflicts of interest, questionable expenses. My blood boiled. He said that to your face? Oliver nodded. His hand trembled slightly, but his eyes burned with quiet fury. I won't let him ruin our marriage, but I can't fight him alone. Emily squeezed his hand. Her eyes searched mine, pleading. Dad, I don't know what to do. I feel trapped. I reached across the table, covering her hand with mine. You're not trapped, Emily. You have me. You always have. But this won't stop on its own. Andrew won't stop until he's forced to. They looked at me, uncertain. I could see the fear in Emily's eyes, the shame in Oliver's. They were young, still building their lives, and Andrew loomed over them like a shadow they couldn't escape. That night, I made a decision. I wouldn't just stand by anymore. I would gather proof of who Andrew really was. The opportunity came sooner than expected. A week later, I received an email from an old acquaintance, a man named Philip who worked in finance in London. He had heard, through mutual contacts, that Andrew was under quiet investigation at his firm. Nothing official yet, but whispers of shady dealings, conflicts of interest, questionable expenses. When I pressed, Philip admitted he couldn't share details without risking his job. But the seed was planted. Andrew wasn't just manipulative at home. He was rotten in his professional life too. I began to dig. I called favors, spoke to former colleagues, checked public records. Piece by piece, a picture emerged. Andrew had been reprimanded twice in the past for inappropriate conduct. There were rumors of affairs, misuse of client funds, even aggressive behavior toward junior employees. The polished exterior was just that, an exterior. Beneath it lay cracks, deep and ugly. I knew I needed proof solid enough to show Emily and Oliver. Something undeniable. Meanwhile, tension at their home escalated. Emily called often, her voice hushed as if she were afraid Andrew could overhear. Dad, he checks our bank statements. He questions every expense. Yesterday, I bought a dress on sale, and he lectured me for 20 minutes about wasting money. Oliver tried to defend me, and Andrew told him to act like a man or step aside. Each call was another knife in my chest. I wanted to storm into their flat and drag Andrew out by the collar, but I knew rash actions would only backfire. Then one evening, Oliver phoned me directly. His tone was grim. Richard, I think he wants to split us up. He keeps telling Emily she deserves a man with ambition. He invites her to dinners without me, says I'll just embarrass her. It's poison, Richard. Pure poison. I clenched my teeth. Then we fight back, together. For the first time, Oliver didn't look at me as just Emily's father. He looked at me as an ally. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source, a young man named Daniel, who had once worked under Andrew. Through a friend of a friend, I managed to contact him. We met in a cafe near London Bridge, Daniel nervous, eyes darting. "You don't know what he's like behind closed doors," Daniel muttered. "He belittles people, screams in meetings, takes credit for others' work. I quit after he threatened to ruin my career if I didn't cover for one of his mistakes. Would you be willing to put that in writing?" I asked carefully. Daniel hesitated, then shook his head. "Not yet. I'm scared, but if there's an investigation, I'll testify." It wasn't hard evidence, but it was more confirmation. Andrew's empire was built on fear and intimidation. One night, I sat in my living room, surrounded by notes, recordings, and scraps of testimony. It felt like preparing for battle. I wasn't just a father anymore, I was a soldier gathering weapons. And then came the call that changed everything. It was Emily. Her voice trembled. "Dad, I think Andrew hit Oliver." My chest tightened. "What happened?" She sobbed. "They argued. Andrew said Oliver was a failure again. Oliver pushed back, told him to stop interfering. And then Andrew shoved him. Hard. Oliver's got a bruise on his jaw. He swears he's fine, but Dad, I'm scared. What if it happens again?" I felt something snap inside me. The time for patience was over. "Emily," I said firmly, "listen to me. You need to get out of there. Tonight, come to my place. Both of you. But Mom, forget your mother. She's blinded by him. This is about your safety now." There was silence, then a whisper, "Okay, Dad." That night, Emily and Oliver arrived at my doorstep, carrying overnight bags and looking like fugitives. Emily collapsed into my arms, sobbing. Oliver's face bore a faint mark on his jaw, proof of Andrew's violence. I let them in, made tea, gave them the spare room. For the first time in months, my house felt alive again, filled with the sound of voices instead of silence. But I knew this was only the beginning. Andrew wouldn't let them go easily. Sure enough, the next day, my phone buzzed. Andrew's number. I ignored it. Minutes later, a message arrived. "You've made a mistake, Richard. A very big mistake." I stared at the screen, then deleted the message. Let him rage. Let him threaten. He had crossed the line. Now, it was my turn. The following week was chaos. Catherine called, furious, demanding I return Emily and Oliver. "They're not children, Richard. You can't just hide them from their own family. They're safe here," I replied coldly. "Which is more than I can say if they were with you and your husband." She gasped. "How dare you? Don't pretend you don't know what Andrew is," I snapped. "Open your eyes, Catherine. Or maybe you don't want to, because then you'd have to admit you married a monster." She hung up, sputtering with outrage. But I didn't care. My focus was on Emily and Oliver. Slowly, they began to relax, to smile again. Emily helped me cook dinner. Oliver fixed a leaky tap in the bathroom. For a few fleeting days, it felt like family, real family. Yet beneath it all, I knew the storm was still coming. Andrew wouldn't stop. Men like him never did. And when the reckoning arrived, I intended to be ready. I thought that after the wedding, after the long silent nights and the awkward dinners, where my absence spoke louder than any words, maybe Emily would reach out. Maybe she'd call. Maybe she'd text. Maybe she'd even just say, "Dad, I miss you." But weeks turned into months, and the silence stretched like a canyon between us. Andrew filled that space instead. He was everywhere in her life. I heard about him through Oliver, through relatives, through whispers that drifted back to me like smoke. Andrew got a better job. Andrew was helping with finances. Andrew was making decisions that Emily once would have asked me about. And every time I heard his name, I felt the same mix of disgust and helplessness. I tried once more. It was 3 months after the wedding. I drove to Emily's apartment, an old brick building downtown where the rent wasn't cheap. I stood outside her door with my hand hovering over the wood, rehearsing what I might say. "I love you. I don't trust him. I'm still your dad." The door opened before I knocked. Andrew stood there, smirking like he'd been waiting for me. "She doesn't want to see you," he said, leaning against the frame. "She's my daughter," I answered. "She's my wife," he shot back, sharp and final. And just like that, the door closed. I didn't even hear Emily's voice. That night I sat in my car outside their building for 2 hours. Lights came on, shadows moved across the curtains. Life went on inside those walls, a life I wasn't allowed to be part of. At one point, I thought I saw Emily's silhouette near the window. I wanted to believe she was looking out, maybe wondering if I was there, maybe wishing she could open the door. But the curtain fell shut, and I was left staring at my own reflection in the windshield. Time didn't soften it. If anything, it made it worse. Oliver grew up fast through all of this. He stopped talking about his sister as much, maybe because he saw it hurt me, Or maybe because he was hurting too. He focused on school, on basketball, on his friends. He became quieter, older than his years. Sometimes I caught him looking at me like he was afraid I'd break. And maybe I did break. In small ways. I stopped checking my phone for Emily's messages. I stopped saving a chair for her at family dinners. I stopped telling stories that included her name. It felt like pulling out a splinter that had gone too deep, painful, bloody, but necessary to heal. My friends told me to move on. My sister said she'd come around eventually. My coworkers said she realized what he's like. But years can pass waiting for someone to realize. And in that time, life doesn't pause. It keeps moving. The last time I saw her, it wasn't planned. It was at the grocery store, almost a year after the wedding. I turned down an aisle, and there she was, holding a basket, her hair tied back, her face pale but determined. For a second, she froze. "Emily," I said. "Dad," she whispered. We stood there, 10 feet apart, surrounded by cereal boxes and strangers. I wanted to close the gap. I wanted to hug her, to tell her it wasn't too late, that she could always come home. But then Andrew appeared from the next aisle, sliding an arm around her shoulder like a claim. He kissed her temple and looked right at me. His eyes said, "She's mine." And Emily didn't move. She didn't shake his arm off, didn't step toward me, didn't even smile. She just stood there, caught between us, and then slowly, almost imperceptibly, she turned away. They walked past me without another word. I didn't follow. That night I sat at my kitchen table with a glass of whiskey, the house too quiet. Oliver was at a friend's place, and it was just me and the hum of the refrigerator. I realized then that the fight was over. Not because I was wrong, and not because I gave up, but because Emily had made her choice. She chose Andrew, whether out of love, stubbornness, fear, or pride. I'll never really know. And I had to live with that so I let her go. Letting go doesn't mean forgetting. It doesn't mean I stopped loving her. It just means I stopped bleeding over someone who didn't want my bandages. I still keep a picture of her on my nightstand. The one from her high school graduation where she's beaming in her cap and gown. That's the Emily I hold on to. The one who hugged me and said, "We did it, Dad." Oliver knows better than to ask about her now. He's seen enough. Sometimes he sits with me on the porch in silence, both of us sipping sodas, watching the world move by. He doesn't say it out loud, but I know he's scared of losing me too. So I make sure he knows I'm not going anywhere. Life shrinks and reshapes itself. Holidays are quieter. Birthdays pass with fewer candles blown out together. The house feels bigger than it used to. And sometimes, in the middle of the night, I wake up and think I hear her voice calling me, the way she did when she was little. But when I open my eyes, it's just the dark. People like to believe every family rift can be healed. That one day the phone will ring, and it'll be her voice on the other end, soft and regretful, saying, "Dad, I'm sorry." But the truth is, not every story ends like that. Some people drift so far away they never circle back. And that's the reality I live with. I paid for her wedding. I gave her everything I could. And in the end, I lost her anyway. But I don't regret drawing the line. Because sometimes, love isn't about saving someone. It's about refusing to drown with them. So I sit here tonight, writing this down. Not for her. Not for Andrew. Not even for Oliver. I write it for myself. To remind myself that I did what I could. That I loved my daughter fiercely. And that losing her doesn't erase the years we had before. And maybe one day, when the silence doesn't hurt so much, I'll believe that was enough.